Hey everyone, welcome to another BookTube channel. I'm Nick, and today I'll be talking about why you might or might not enjoy the Stormlight Archive. If you're even mildly active in the BookTube, Bookstagram, or BookTok communities, you've probably at least heard of the Stormlight Archive in passing. It's written by superstar fantasy author Brandon Sanderson, who made news last year when a Kickstarter he ran became the most funded campaign in the history of the site. Sanderson has been publishing books in his shared Cosmere universe since 2006, with the Stormlight Archive starting in 2010. While his Mistborn series is what really rocketed him to mainstream success and is probably still considered his most beloved works, I don't think I'm out of line to say that his planned 10-book Stormlight Archive is on pace to become his magnum opus. So what is it about the Stormlight Archive that has drawn people in, and most importantly, would you like it? If you are hesitant to start the series for any reasons, I'm hoping this video can help you make that decision one way or the other. I think the thing to do here is to start with as brief a description as possible of what the Stormlight Archive is actually about, its world, and what's happening on it. The Stormlight Archive takes place on the continent of Roshar, which is on the planet of the same name. The world of Roshar is constantly bombarded with powerful high storms, which people and cities have grown accustomed to and built their lives around. With the storms comes Stormlight, a mysterious gas that infuses into gemstones, which are most commonly used as currency. Stormlight was also used historically by a group called the Knights Radiant, an order of surge binders who were committed to protecting Roshar from the threat of desolations. The Knights would absorb Stormlight, which granted them a variety of powers depending on their order. Centuries ago, the Knights Radiant abandoned Roshar for unknown reasons, turning them from heroes to figures of scorn in modern times. However, a new, or perhaps very old, threat to Roshar is rising, and the only hope may lie on the shoulders of a new order of Knights Radiant. So right off the bat, if that description, which I did try to keep brief but also give you some detail to give you some flavor of the world, made your eyes glaze over and want to turn the video off, then the Stormlight Archive might not be for you. It is a heavily detailed fantasy series that is full of jargon like I just used, so it can be sometimes very difficult to keep everything straight. It's not just a matter of learning and understanding a magic system, it's learning and understanding multiple magic systems and multiple societal structures and political hierarchies, dozens of orders of people and magical beings and their own unique powers, the science of Roshar as technology advances, not to mention keeping up with dozens of important characters who each have their own motivations and goals. It's a very tall task, and honestly, even I have to go back to the wiki once in a while to remind myself of who someone is or how something works. So unless your mind is a steel trap or you take diligent notes while reading, you are most likely going to have to do a little bit of extra research to fully appreciate the total breadth of this story, and that's not for everyone. However, despite being so detailed, the Stormlight Archive is never dry or boring. It can be a bit slow at times, but it's always at least interesting. Brandon Sanderson is a very accessible writer with simple prose, some would say maybe too simple, who keeps things moving at a reasonable clip at all times. He also understands the importance and timing of exposition dumping. Exposition dumping gets a bad rap and I think is unfairly criticized in some cases. I find it particularly annoying in movies where characters stop the scene dead to go over everything that has happened thus far, what they're doing now, what's going to happen next. But I don't find this as annoying in books, I kind of welcome it. In a movie, you've only got 2 hours typically to tell a full story, so to be given a recap in the middle of one is kind of like the filmmaker telling you, yeah, you're probably too dumb to have kept up with only 1 hour of information, so here's a reminder, dummy. But in a book, and particularly a book series, exposition dumping is a blessing. I took a break of about 8 months between reading books 3 and 4 of Stormlight, and I'm gonna be honest, I did forget a pretty decent chunk of what was going on. Luckily for me, Sanderson finds appropriate times throughout the book to issue reminders to readers of what they may have forgotten or missed in the form of one character just explaining to a newer character what's going on. If you have perfect total recall and you find this annoying, I understand. But for those of us who forget what they ate for breakfast yesterday, it's very much appreciated. Going back to the description I provided, if you found it interesting and you want to find out more about what a surge binder is and what types of powers Stormlight grants, then you've got the inquisitive spirit that I believe is necessary to dive into a fantasy world like this. It is endlessly rich and is constantly being built upon. One of my criticisms of Mistborn Era 1 is that the current society and technology of that time is established in Book 1 and shows little to no improvement through Books 2 and 3, which leads to those sequels feeling a bit repetitive to me and is the main reason that I enjoy Mistborn Era 2 more, but see my full video on that for more details. But this is not a problem in Stormlight Archive, because in each of the 4 published books, there has been a significant enough advancement in the world of Roshar so that there is absolutely no stagnation. New powers are revealed, new technologies are developed, new social structures are established. There is always something new to learn in each subsequent book, and it's thrilling to always have that feeling of discovery renewed. And I haven't yet touched on one of the greatest strengths of the Stormlight Archive, and that is its wonderfully developed characters and the honest, sympathetic depiction of mental illness and physical disability. The depictions of mental illness in particular are probably one of the most talked about aspects of the series, and it absolutely lives up to the hype around it. Our main characters, not side characters, not characters mentioned in passing, main characters are all suffering in some capacity, and if you pull away all of the world-spanning action and intrigue, these books are mostly about those characters trying to work through their issues. There are no quick magical cures here. These characters are putting in a lot of work to try to get themselves to a better place mentally, and it's one of the most engaging aspects of the book. Perhaps most importantly, Sanderson doesn't make it a consistent step-by-step ascent out of the darkness. Characters backslide and relapse all the time, and they react in realistic ways. These chapters are my favorite in Stormlight, much more so than any action scene in which characters are trying to stab each other while flying. The series is far from over, and I am really hopeful that at its end, Sanderson doesn't just magically cure all the characters of what ails them. That would seem dishonest and a bit of a cheat, as real mental illness is not something that can be magicked away. But we've got a long time before we see how it resolves. And speaking of that, another big reason you might not enjoy the Stormlight Archive is because of the commitment. If we look at it from a micro level and just take each book individually, these books are massive. No matter what format you pick the books up in, they are all over 1,000 pages long. Books of that length are not for everyone, especially if you consider yourself to be a slower reader. It can be disheartening and, frankly, exhausting to be reading the same book for weeks and still only see your bookmark at the halfway point. If we take a step back and look at the series from a macro level, we are at a point where only 4 books have been published in the series, with 5 currently being written. Sanderson has stated he envisions the series as 10 books long, and most likely all will be at least 1,000 pages in length if the trend continues. But also, Sanderson is a writing machine, so there is a very real possibility that he's underestimating the number of books that he's going to need. Maybe it'll be actually 11 or 12 or 15. And considering it took him 10 years to publish the first 4 books, even if he hits his mark of only 10 books, that's another 12 years at least before the series is done. But it'll likely be even more than that, considering he has also promised 2 more Mistborn eras of at least 3 books each, plus sequels to Elantris and I believe Warbreaker. So it's not out of the question at all that we may have to wait anywhere from 15 to 20 years to see the end of the Stormlight Archive. Just think about that for a moment. I could potentially be 50 years old by the time Stormlight is done. If you're anything like me and the passage of time scares you to death and the idea of your own mortality is a shadow that hangs over your everyday existence, that is horrifying. Not only is Stormlight on its own lengthy, but remember, it's part of Sanderson's Cosmere, which most of his books take place in. While none of his other novels are as long as any book from Stormlight, since these stories have all been crossing over lately in fun, interesting ways, you would get the most out of the experience by reading all of Sanderson's work, which means even more books to add to your TBR and even more lore to keep track of. It's absolutely not a necessity to read everything, but it certainly is part of what makes the series so fun. One more thing to mention here is that the Stormlight Archive is not grimdark fantasy. I know that that's a really big thing right now. Some people only like grimdark, some people don't like it at all. And if you prefer your fantasy to be on the cleaner side, then you should be fine with Stormlight. There is violence, it can be a bit bloody, but it's not overly indulgent or gory or disgusting like that. And there's no vulgar language either, so you could comfortably listen to the audiobooks in a home full of children, and you don't have to worry about them hearing something that they shouldn't. So there we go, my arguments as to why you may or may not enjoy the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. If you've already read the books, let me know if you agree with my breakdown in the comments. If you were on the fence about the series, let me know if this video helped you in any way to decide one way or the other whether to read them or not. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.